but welcome to media availability. Appreciate those online. Look forward to any questions. I hope we may have some Medicaid questions, but hopefully we're moving on to some other issues. But open it up.
There's always Medicaid questions.
There.
The House is looking at possibly taking some elements out of HB 210. I understand the Ray Ward bill and putting it into SB 96. I guess that's one of the options that's being considered as they look at, as they say, making the Senate bill better. I'm wondering what kind of interest there would be on this side for changes. It sounds like you've anticipated changes all along. What are you hearing from your House counterparts in leadership, and what do you think will fly over here?
It's a refining process, and as we go through, we expect changes. Some of the principles I think that we want to try to maintain are fiscal responsibility. So trying to make sure that we have caps. We've seen other states, and you've heard testimonies on both sides, that it expands and costs the states lots of money and becomes very challenging to fund. And then we've heard that it expands and it just stays within the projections. And we're not sure which, but we do know that we have to balance the budget and we want to be fiscally prudent. So whatever changes they make, I think we want to make sure that it maintains the ability for us to cap enrollment and to be able to keep our process fiscally responsible. Great to have you here, Senator Iwamoto. Right there, that's great.
So you want to make sure an enrollment cap stays. What about changing the bridge program to open it up initially so it looks more like Prop 3 and then going, while you seek the 90-10 federal match that everyone seems to feel is more fiscally responsible?
Yeah, I still ask the question in my mind. The bridge program does expand Medicaid, and it takes it up to 100%, and it actually allows for us to go from 100 to 138. So we cover in some ways from 0 to 138. Currently, and Lisa, you asked this question, and I think we probably need to explore it even more. The take rate on normal Medicaid, and I don't see Senator Hemmert here or Senator Christensen, but it's not 100%. And we have 40,000 people right now on platinum plans, or being paid for, at least I think, if I say it right, 98% from the federal government, and with a very small portion, 24 to maybe $30 a month, that they're responsible for themselves. But they're already on it, 40,000 people. So my question would be, why would we ever push them off? And they must like their plan, and we probably ought to do some interviews with them and say, why would you really want a Medicaid plan instead of a regular insurance plan? And so I don't know why we would do that, okay?
My understanding, though, is that Medicaid expansion doesn't automatically push those people off. They would still have the option to stay with the federally subsidized plan if that's what they wanted to do.
But they're on it, they're happy, and and again, we have to make sure it's fiscally responsible. And so if our cost for that from the 100 to 138 is 0, the federal government's paying 100% of it, we don't split it with a 90-10 or 70-30. If we want to maintain a fiscally responsible program, why would we move on to a program that we had to split 70-30 or 90-10? And as we look out into the future, if we have caps, that would, and I asked this of one of the advocates after our public hearing, would you want to pay $24 a month and have more people on Medicaid, or would you want to have 100% coverage and less people on Medicaid? And he said if it meant that financial stability and I could put more people on this program, I would pay my $24 a month. And so, again, it's a matter of do we allow more people on fiscally responsible, or because we're gonna run out of money sometime, or do we use the most fiscally responsible program that allows for a little bit of participation? And with 40,000 people out of 50 on it, that's a pretty good take rate.
But the initial bridge plan in the SB 96 has a 70-30 split,
It does.
right? So you're spending more on that end than you would if you just accepted full Medicaid
But
expansion.
between 100 and 138, it's no different. Because 70-30 is from 0 to 100%.
But I think SB 96 is still more expensive than the bridge
It is.
plan, even with
It
the
is.
less.
It is, and that's the whole point of the waiver, is we want to be able to not expand clear to, well, we want to be able to have that option between 100 to 138. And if we don't keep that option in there, and that's why it'd be very difficult to do it in the bridge process, if we don't keep it in there, we lose that option. Does that make sense?
You think it would be really hard to go from full expansion in a bridge to the more limited 90-10 up to 100?
I think it'd be confusing, and I think it would be hard. I mean, you're bouncing people around. And it does cost more, obviously, for this bridge period of time. But we're spending a little bit of money now, a few $1 million, which is hard for many of us to say. Most of us aren't used to dealing in millions. But we're gonna save hundreds of millions later on. And that's what we're trying to do. Again, be fiscally responsible and fully cover from 100 to 138, so in some way, shape, or form.
But you also give up a good bit of federal money by not, I think the fiscal note suggested it would add up to more than $1 billion pretty quickly. That would be left on the table because you're only covering up to 100%.
And Senator Hammer, I think, objected to that, and so did I.
Okay.
And the reason is because, again, between 100 and 138, you may have people paying the state Medicaid dollars, 90%, and we then pay the providers. This way, you're having the federal government pay the insurance companies, and they pay the providers. So would you rather have that money come filter through an insurance company for a policy, or would you rather have it be paid to the state? And those monies are coming to the state either to a private organization in the state, meaning an insurance company, or they're coming in directly to the state. The state's dispersing Medicaid dollars. So we're not giving up millions of dollars, so I kind of object that. Just as because we're not getting it as a state organization doesn't mean it's coming into the state itself, meaning Blue Cross, Select Health, whatever other insurance provider there is. Does that make sense? So that's a comment, but I just don't think it has to be filled by the state. I actually think it's better to go through a private company. It keeps them healthier. Those of us that pay our insurance policies, if we have a healthier insurance company, hopefully our rates are going to be lower also. Great questions on Medicaid. But we actually believe we did the right thing. We still believe that. We're trying to fully expand in some way, shape, or form, but do it in a fiscally responsible way. So, other questions?
Just on the base budgets, I know that it's just a starting point and there's a ways to go in developing the budget. Can you just comment briefly on, how you feel about where things stand at this point?
Senator Ibsen's here, and I'm going to let him kick that one off. So,
our committees are doing their work, and I think we have to let them do their work. Agencies are reporting to them, and our base budget is pretty much where we were last year. We haven't asked them to subtract or add to that. They have the authority within the appropriations budgets to move money around. I think it's early in the process for us to know what new money looks like. Hasn't been much discussion about that. So as the committees work on that, and they look at the building blocks, they look at new requests for appropriation, and they rank those in the committees, we'll see where we go from there.
I could add a little bit on that. There's a little bit of a different process this year. In years past, we've asked the committees to look at a 2 or 3% reduction in spending and then see how they might prioritize that. This year, instead of going through that process, and quite often, and actually quite frankly, every year that was given back to the committee, that 2 or 3%. This year, instead of doing that, they're giving the committee the authority to, if they find efficiencies within their budget, to be able to reallocate that and use it in different areas without coming back. So the budget, and also there's a couple of things at least one that I know of in particular, the National Guard building, and Nephi was put in the base budget, which was left out of our budget priorities last year. I felt like that was one that it's a $4.5 million for a $20 million match from the federal government. You know, that was one that we felt really important that we needed to get that taken care of in the base budget. So, yeah, just a little different process, but the base budget process, and Senator Hilliard can speak a lot more eloquently than I can to it because he's dealt with it for many years. But it's certainly, I just come to really appreciate that process.
So where did the 4.5 million come from? Was that reallocated from an efficiency, or was that just an addition to the base budget somehow?
I think we moved it as just a plain addition.
Yeah, it was an addition we talked about during the, the
Okay,
interim
so
committee.
surplus
Yeah.
basically, 'cause
Yeah.
it's one-time
Supplemental
money,
from
right?
last year. yeah.
Supplemental.
So,
When we did the reallocation for paying for the prison, that was when we did that.
and rather than ask, the National Guard presented last year, everybody's familiar with the building. Rather than put them through the effort of coming back up, we knew that we were gonna fund that, and so we just put it in the base budget.
Remain number one of the building board's priorities, so.
Okay,
Senator
okay,
Hilliard, yeah, any comments on the budget? You've been around.
It's really kind of been interesting to do public ed this year in this aspect, that by doing the base budget, you take off probably 95% of the money, and you don't need to waste your time arguing about that so much. You can concentrate on what changes you want to make. But if we had to reinvent the WPU every year, you can imagine we'd be here months. The committee is an interesting one because it's a rather large committee, and it should be, because number one, public ed is probably our number one priority, and everybody, or not everybody, but most people would like to serve on the committee. And I've been impressed as I've chaired that committee, how in interest everybody is. They listen, they pay attention, we have good attendance at our meetings, and that, so we have three big questions. Number one, what are we gonna fund? Number two, how much we're gonna fund it? And three, the way we're gonna fund it. Senator Milner is carrying a bill that brings in some of the suggestions and recommendations of our schools now, which has a way of redirecting the money more on a local basis to be used more directly in the school building itself, rather than we've done top up coming down. And it's going to be interesting as we get the dialogue going, how we're going to really implement that the best way, have buy-in from the public ed on it so they understand it as well, and the public. Because I think the thing that our schools now heard was that people said they wanted to give more money to public education, but they wanted to make sure it got to the classroom. And so that's been one of the concerns we fund on a state level. We give the state board, they give it to the local districts, and the local districts spend it. I think this will have more of a local impact on it. And the question is how fast we can implement it and how well we can implement it with buy-in from local districts. But again, we can easily spend double the money you have there, and we still wouldn't have enough. But again, I think the committee itself is paying good attention, and we did it the last 2 years. We've been able to come up with a recommendation. I'll sit down with Senator Stevenson, and we'll try to figure out how much money that public ed has to spend, and then we'll prioritize to that level. And many years I've been up here, they just said a list of millions and millions and millions with no prioritization.
Yeah.
So that makes it very difficult for executive appropriations to sit down and figure out. Jamie's been on the committee, Senator Yomoto, excuse me.
Any
No.
comments,
Yes,
Senator Yomoto?
I just want to say, from my experience and being on public ed those years, I really appreciated the inclusiveness of everybody that Senator Hilliard has had on that committee. And we talk about it, and a lot of people get confused because the governor proposes a budget, and they think we're not doing that, but we are the ones that appropriate the money. So it may be different, we're very similar to the governor's budget or not, but I think people get confused about that. But I've noticed on all the appropriation committees that I've sat on, We have a great fiscal analyst that we have at the legislature, and we're always trying to save money and make sure that what we spend is on things, we really look at the budgets, and I appreciate that about our legislature.
And I'm a fan of base budgets, because right now we just passed our budget, and if we had to leave, we've passed the budget, and I
If
think
we get
that's.
25 more snow days, we'd still
That's
have.
right. And I think it gives us great flexibility as we look at, as we work through the budget process, that we know that we have a base that's underneath us, and we know that we can fund government. And we've seen what happens in the federal government when they walk away and we don't have budgets, continuing resolutions. I think we manage our affairs well, and this is one of the processes. Right now, the citizens can know that we have a budget in place, and we can function this next year if we don't do any more work, but you'll see us do a lot more work on budgets, so I think it's a good process. Senator Miller, any comments?
No, certainly education is a high priority for us, as it is every year. And we're going to continue to work through the process and really try to best support our classrooms and our teachers and strive for student success. And then while balancing all the other areas such as Medicaid and other areas that we need to fund.
Any online questions? We've got a management meeting, so no online. Any other questions before we take off? Appreciate you being here. We'll see you back tomorrow, so thank you again.
Assuming the weather clears.
Yep.